Everyone thought they knew Marilyn Monroe. Nobody knew about the 400 books. A woman's handwriting on a hotel room page. 3 words: help, help, help. That's what scholars found when they opened Marilyn Monroe's private notebooks in 2010. But here's what no one expected. Sandwiched between those desperate cries were poems that could stand alongside Whitman and Dickinson, annotations on Freud and Joyce, and evidence of an intellect that Hollywood spent 15 years making sure you'd never see. The woman the world reduced to a body was secretly one of the most voracious readers in Hollywood. She owned over 400 books. She annotated them. She studied them obsessively. She carried them everywhere she went, to film sets, on airplanes, into bathtubs where bookmarks got waterlogged. And when those books finally went public, they didn't just surprise people. They dismantled every single thing Hollywood ever said about her. But here's what makes this story different from every other Marilyn Monroe documentary you've seen. This isn't about her relationships. It isn't about how she passed away. It isn't about the conspiracy theories. This is about 400 books, and the woman they reveal when you finally pay attention to what she was reading, what she was writing, and what she was thinking when nobody was looking. This story starts with 400 books that were never supposed to go public. The auction that rewrote history. October 1999, Christie's auction house, New York City. The personal estate of Marilyn Monroe was being auctioned off piece by piece. For hours, it was exactly what you'd expect: jewelry, gowns, a pair of red heels. Personal effects from the most famous woman of the 20th century. Collectors bid, cameras flashed, everything proceeded according to plan, then something nobody anticipated. The auction house staff wheeled out carts. Not one cart, multiple carts stacked with books, not a handful of coffee table volumes purchased for decoration. Over 400 books, cart after cart after cart, rolling into a room full of people who had no idea what they were looking at. The auction room went dead silent, not out of reverence, out of confusion, because Marilyn Monroe and books didn't fit together in anyone's mind, not in 1999, not after 37 years of a story that said otherwise. She was the girl in the white dress over the subway grate, the breathy voice singing "Happy Birthday" to the president. The tragic blonde who passed away at 36, leaving behind beauty and supposedly nothing else. That was the version of Marilyn Monroe the world had been sold since 1962, and every person sitting in that auction room had bought it completely. But these books told a completely different story. And here's what stunned the Christie staff more than the quantity. It was the condition. Sigmund Freud's complete works on psychoanalysis, spines cracked from being opened hundreds of times, pages dog-eared, passages underlined in pencil. James Joyce's Ulysses, marginalia in Marilyn's own handwriting filling the margins. Fyodor Dostoyevsky's novels, every single one bearing marks of obsessive, repeated study. Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man, Thomas Paine's The Rights of Man, poetry by Walt Whitman and Emily Dickinson. Tennessee Williams' plays. Acting theory by Konstantin Stanislavski. Cloth bindings frayed from constant handling. Paper covers creased from being shoved into handbags and carried between film sets. Bookmarks still tucked inside pages, some of them cocktail napkins with notes scribbled in her hand. The smell of old paper and cigarette smoke still clinging to the pages. These books had traveled cross-country between Los Angeles and New York. They had been brought to film sets, read in cars between appointments, studied late at night when insomnia made sleep impossible. These weren't decoration. These were the books of someone who treated reading not as a hobby, but as survival. By the final lot, Christie's had raised $13.6 million from Marilyn Monroe's estate. And every single penny of the book proceeds went to Literacy Partners, a charity dedicated to literacy education for struggling readers. Think about that for a moment. A woman whose formal education was shattered by the foster care system. A woman Hollywood kept functionally invisible as an intellect for 3 decades. That woman, after her passing, became one of the largest single donors to literacy education in American history. For 37 years, the world believed a fiction about Marilyn Monroe. The books proved it was a lie. They sat there the entire time, in her home, on her shelves, filled with her thoughts written in the margins. Physical evidence that everything Hollywood said about her was a myth she'd been forced to perform, but the auction only revealed what she read. It took another decade to discover what she was writing in private, and when those pages finally surfaced, no one was ready for what they said. Help, 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 2010. 48 years after her passing, a book appeared that transformed everything scholars thought they knew about Marilyn Monroe's inner life. It was called Fragments: Poems, Intimate Notes, Letters, a compilation of her private writings assembled from scraps of paper, hotel letterheads, spiral notebooks, and loose pages found tucked into books and drawers throughout her belongings. The world had no idea she'd been writing anything beyond autographs for fans. What those pages revealed was unbearable. "Fear of giving me the new lines," she wrote. "Maybe I won't be able to learn them. Maybe I'll make mistakes. People will either think I'm no good or laugh or belittle me." This was the biggest star in Hollywood, commanding record salaries, drawing audiences in numbers that made studio executives wealthy beyond imagination. And she was terrified every single day that someone would discover she was a fraud, that people would see through the performance and find nothing underneath. Then, on one page, 3 words written alone: "Help, help, help." No context, no explanation, just 3 desperate words on hotel stationery, written alone, never answered, and elsewhere: "I feel life coming closer when all I want is to pass away." She documented the contradiction she could never escape. "I seek joy," she wrote, "but it is clothed with pain." 8 words capturing an entire life spent performing happiness while drowning in sorrow. The world saw the smile, the laugh, the playful persona. She felt the weight of that performance crushing her. Every photograph was a lie she had to sell. Every interview was a character she had to inhabit. Every public appearance required her to be Marilyn Monroe, the creation, the myth, the commodity, while the woman who wrote "Help, help, help" was screaming inside a body that belonged to everyone but herself. These weren't reflections written years later. They were real-time distress signals, scribbled on whatever paper was nearby and shoved into drawers where they'd remain hidden for almost half a century. She could name her suffering with a clarity that would impress clinical psychologists. She could articulate what was happening to her with precision most people never achieve about their own lives. And she fought it entirely alone while cameras captured her smiling for premieres and magazine covers. We're reading her distress signals 50 years too late. The help she begged for never came. The diary entries sit in published form now, available to anyone who wants to read them. They prove that Marilyn Monroe understood exactly what was happening to her. She saw the trap. She named the pain. She called for help in words that couldn't have been clearer, and nobody answered. But the diaries only captured her despair. She was creating something else in those private moments, and it proved she wasn't just suffering. She was an artist, one the world refused to see. The poet Hollywood never saw. Those same pages contain poetry, not celebrity dabbling, not a famous person playing at art to seem deeper than they were. Real poetry about isolation, loneliness, and the impossibility of true human connection. Monroe was writing as a poet, and nobody knew until 2010, when those pages were finally compiled and published. One verse haunts more than all the others. "Only parts of us will ever touch parts of others," she wrote. "One's own truth is just that, really, one's own truth." Read that again. The biggest star on the planet, surrounded by millions of admirers, and she's writing about how no one ever fully connects, how we only ever touch fragments of each other across an unbridgeable distance. Never the whole person reaching the whole person. Never complete understanding. She scribbled these on hotel stationery between takes while photographers waited outside her door. A reporter once glimpsed her reading Whitman in her dressing room. He asked if she understood it. She smiled and said yes. He laughed and walked away. He never wrote about it. Why would he? Marilyn Monroe reading Whitman didn't fit the story anyone was selling. It would have confused readers. It would have complicated the brand. So he ignored what he saw with his own eyes and kept the myth intact. Her poetry had the same sweep as Whitman, the same razor precision as Dickinson, the same romantic melancholy as Heinrich Heine, whose work she also kept in her library. She'd absorbed their techniques so completely they shaped her own voice. She was writing verses about truth, identity, and human connection with a sophistication that matched the masters she studied, and she never knew anyone would take her seriously. She lived her entire life believing she was only valuable as a body. The poetry proves she was wrong, but she never got to hear that. So here's the question that changes everything. How did a foster child with barely any formal education discover these poets in the first place? The foster child who built a university. Marilyn Monroe's formal education was destroyed before it ever truly began. 11 foster homes, 11 different schools. By 16, she'd been abandoned so many times she stopped counting. She barely finished high school. College was never a possibility, not for a girl the system had already discarded. Hollywood would later use her lack of credentials as proof that she had nothing going on upstairs. No degree, no training, no intellect worth acknowledging. Here's what Hollywood never knew. While they filmed her in bit parts during the day, she was sitting in UCLA literature courses at night. She would film 12-hour days on studio sets, drive across Los Angeles in evening traffic, and sit in university classrooms learning about modernist poetry and Renaissance painting. She studied alongside students half her fame and twice her formal education. She took notes. She did the reading. She showed up week after week, invisible in a lecture hall where nobody recognized the biggest movie star in America sitting in the back row with a notebook. When other young actresses attended parties and premieres to be seen by the right people, Monroe was in a lecture hall, rebuilding the education the foster system stole, one night class at a time. While Hollywood told her she was too pretty to need a brain, she was reading Chekhov in a campus library. Her personal library became what she called her private university, 430 volumes by the time of her passing. She brought books to film sets and read between takes while other actors socialized, smoked, and played cards. A co-star once asked what she was reading. "Dostoyevsky," she said. He laughed. "You mean you're looking at the pictures?" She closed the book and never brought it to his set again. She learned another lesson, the same lesson she kept learning throughout her life. Showing what she actually was made her a target. She carried books on cross-country flights, reading while everyone else slept. She kept books on her nightstand by her bathtub in her car. They weren't status symbols. They were lifelines. Evidence that she refused to accept the identity Hollywood forced on her. Evidence that she was building something they couldn't touch, an inner life rich enough to survive the machinery grinding her down from the outside. She took what the foster care system stole and rebuilt it herself, one book at a time. While Hollywood told her she wasn't smart enough to understand the scripts they handed her, she was studying literature at one of America's most prestigious universities. They were casting her as girl number 3. And then one photograph almost blew the whole cover story apart. Ulysses on a playground, 1955, Long Island, New York. Photographer Eve Arnold captured one of the most controversial images of the 20th century. Marilyn Monroe sitting on a children's playground, completely absorbed in a book, not posing with it, not holding it as a prop, reading it, genuinely, visibly lost in the pages. Not just any book, James Joyce's Ulysses, widely considered one of the most difficult novels ever written in the English language, a book that baffled university professors, a book that had been banned for obscenity. And there sat Marilyn Monroe, reading it on a playground like it was something she'd picked up at the drugstore. Critics immediately screamed publicity stunt. Of course she wasn't really reading Joyce. Beautiful blonde, playground full of children, impossibly difficult book. Too perfect. Obviously staged. Newspapers ran the photo with mocking captions. Late-night comedians made jokes. The photograph became infamous not as evidence of Monroe's intelligence, but as proof of Hollywood's desperate attempts to manufacture depth where none existed. People looked at the image and saw exactly what they expected to see. A beautiful woman pretending, because accepting it as real would have meant admitting they'd been wrong about her for years. Eve Arnold spent the rest of her life fighting that claim. In interview after interview, decade after decade, she told the same story. The photo session was genuine. Monroe initiated the entire collaboration specifically because she wanted to be photographed with the book she'd been reading. There was no studio publicist involved, no marketing angle, no agent whispering in her ear about image management. Monroe called Arnold and said she wanted to do the shoot. Arnold asked why Ulysses. Monroe explained that she'd kept the novel in her car for months, reading passages aloud to grasp what she called the beautiful sound of the prose. She wasn't reading the book cover to cover in traditional fashion. She was dipping in, circling back, jumping forward and backward, letting sections resonate before moving on. No professor told her to do this, no study guide, no literature class. She'd independently discovered the ideal way to approach Joyce's experimental masterpiece, understanding the writing as music before understanding it as narrative. She figured out what Joyce scholars spend entire careers debating, entirely on her own, in the front seat of her car, reading aloud to herself. Arnold's testimony was dismissed. The photograph was labeled a hoax, and Monroe kept reading Joyce in private, where no one could mock her for it. She'd learned the lesson Hollywood taught her over and over. Showing her intelligence made her a target. Playing the empty-headed blonde kept her employed. If this story is changing how you see Marilyn Monroe, hit subscribe. because what comes next is even harder to believe. But Joyce was just the beginning. Some books in her library were far more dangerous, not to Hollywood, but to her own survival. Freud, psychology, and survival. Monroe's library contained Sigmund Freud's complete works. Not a summary, not a popular introduction. The complete works, the interpretation of dreams, theories on the unconscious mind, volumes on psychoanalysis, and the mechanisms of repression. She also owned Carl Menninger's Man Against Himself, a clinical study analyzing the psychology of internal crisis. For a woman who would pass away at 36 under circumstances still debated 6 decades later, these book choices feel unbearably prophetic. But here's the detail that breaks you. She kept a notebook where she tracked her own psychology, not a diary in the traditional sense, not a record of events or daily happenings, a clinical self-assessment journal, daily mood logs, cognitive exercises she'd designed for herself based on what she was reading, self-assessments written in small, precise handwriting that grew more desperate in later entries. She rated her own emotional states. She tracked patterns in her thinking. She tried to identify what triggered her worst episodes. She was her own therapist because no one else could see what was happening. The notebook sat on her bedside table, filled with observations about her own mental state that read like a case study written from the inside. She analyzed herself with the same clinical distance Freud brought to his patients. Except she was both doctor and patient, completely alone in trying to understand why she felt the way she felt. She also owned Erich Fromm's 1956 book, The Art of Loving, which argued that love cannot function as a mere commodity to be bought and sold. Think about what that meant for Hollywood's ultimate commodity, the woman whose image sold everything from movies to magazines to the very idea of desirability itself. Fromm's thesis must have read like a diagnosis of her entire existence. She was the most admired woman in the world, and Fromm told her the devastating truth. Admiration isn't love. Being wanted isn't being loved. Being desired by millions isn't the same as being understood by one person. She was weaponizing psychology as a survival manual, using Freud to navigate a tormented inner world while the outside world obsessed over her appearance, using Fromm to understand why the attention of millions felt so hollow compared to the love she desperately needed. The books weren't enough to save her, but she tried, with every intellectual tool she had. The presence of Freud and Fromm in her library proves she fought for her own survival with the only weapons available to her, her mind and the books she could carry. Now, she understood what was happening to her. She could name it, she could analyze it with clinical precision, but could the men closest to her see it too? The answer is worse than you think. The men who missed the point. June 1956. Marilyn Monroe married Arthur Miller, Pulitzer Prize-winning playwright, intellectual celebrity, the most respected dramatist in America. The press immediately labeled them the brain and the body. That headline reduced their entire marriage to anatomy versus intellect before it even began. Monroe believed this marriage would be different. Miller was a thinker, a reader. Surely he would see past the Hollywood image to the woman reading Dostoyevsky at breakfast and annotating Freud before bed. Miller's private diaries, published after his passing decades later, revealed what he actually thought of his famous wife. He found her emotional neediness exhausting. Her psychological instability threatened his ability to write, to think, to create. He wrote that her problems interfered with his work, as if the woman reading Dostoyevsky in the next room was an obstacle to his creativity rather than a fellow intellectual in crisis. The intellectual partnership Monroe desperately hoped for became another arena where she was weighed, measured, and found lacking. He'd lock himself in his study while she read Dostoyevsky alone in the bedroom. Two intellectuals living in the same house, completely unable to see each other. The cruelest irony of Monroe's life might be this. She married the brain hoping for intellectual partnership. He married the body and spent years wishing the mind would stop making demands. Even the celebrated playwright, married to a woman who could discuss Joyce and Freud with more passion than most university professors, couldn't see past the Hollywood myth he'd married into. But other literary men did see her. Truman Capote became a genuine friend. He respected her mind and never condescended. He spoke publicly about her intelligence when others wouldn't. Carl Sandburg spent an evening talking with her and came away stunned by her dedication to self-education. He told people afterward that she was one of the most curious minds he'd encountered. Saul Bellow said flat out that she'd bowled him over with her wit and insight. She could hold her own in conversation with some of the greatest writers of the 20th century, and they knew it. The men who talked to her about books saw the reader. The man who married her saw an inconvenience attached to a famous body. Monroe spent another relationship feeling invisible despite being the most photographed woman alive. But her library contained something even more surprising, books that could have ended her career overnight. The radical reader. Monroe's library was dangerous for 1950s Hollywood. This was the McCarthy era. The House Un-American Activities Committee was destroying careers over the wrong book on your shelf. Actors blacklisted for attending the wrong meeting. Directors exiled to Europe because someone named them in testimony. Writers forced to use fake names just to keep working. Entire lives dismantled because of associations, beliefs, reading habits. The entertainment industry was paralyzed by fear. People burned books. People hid their libraries. People lied about what they read. And Marilyn Monroe kept Thomas Paine's The Rights of Man on her bookshelf, a revolutionary text about overthrowing tyranny. Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man, a novel exploring how entire groups of people are rendered invisible despite constant surveillance, books on the working class. She didn't hide them. She didn't apologize for them. She kept them right there on the shelf where anyone could see them. When the FBI compiled a file on Monroe, and they did over the course of years, agents noted her associations, her reading material, her political sympathies. She was being watched by the most powerful law enforcement agency in the country. And she kept the books anyway. That tells you something about who she really was. Her connection to Ellison ran deep. Invisible Man isn't about being ignored. It's about being seen wrong, having your real self erased while a projected fantasy takes its place. Monroe lived that every single day of her adult life. Everyone saw Marilyn Monroe. The image, the brand, the body. No one saw the woman who wrote poetry and studied Freud and kept revolutionary politics on her nightstand. She was the ultimate example of visible invisibility, the most watched woman in America who felt completely unseen. When HUAC came for Arthur Miller, Monroe didn't distance herself to protect her career the way Hollywood expected. Every publicist in town would have told her to stay away, protect the brand, don't associate with someone under investigation. She ignored all of it. She stood beside him at the hearings. She converted to Judaism for him despite the industry's casual bigotry. She chose loyalty over self-preservation while reading revolutionary politics in private. Politics and poetry were rebellions fought behind closed doors. But her most disciplined reading was about something else entirely, the craft itself. And it became her final weapon against an industry that refused to take her seriously. Stanislavski, Streetcar, and The Craft After Miller dismissed her, and Hollywood reduced her to a product. Monroe had one last card to play. If they wouldn't respect the woman, she'd force them to respect the actress. She turned to Lee Strasberg as the most demanding acting teacher in America, and she threw herself into the work with an intensity that shocked everyone around her. Her library included foundational texts on acting theory, Stanislavski's works on psychological realism and emotional truth, plays by Clifford Odets, Arthur Miller's major works, Tennessee Williams' complete plays. She'd read Stanislavski between takes while other actresses touched up makeup and gossiped about directors. When a director saw the book in her hands, he said, "You're trying to make us all look bad?" She never brought it to his set again. Another lesson learned, another door closed. Her personal copy of Tennessee Williams's A Streetcar Named Desire was filled with handwritten annotations, not casual underlines. Serious character analysis of Blanche Dubois, page after page of notes in Monroe's handwriting, breaking down Blanche's psychology, mapping her emotional arc, analyzing her delusions, her desperation, her need to construct a fantasy self to survive. Emotional preparation strategies written in the margins for how an actress would embody that kind of internal collapse. She cross-referenced Williams with Stanislavski, noting where Williams' dramatic techniques aligned with Stanislavski's theories on emotional recall. She wasn't reading the play for enjoyment. She was dissecting it like a surgeon studying anatomy, analyzing how Williams transformed internal psychological collapse into external dramatic action. These weren't the notes of an amateur. They were the notes of someone who understood dramatic theory at a professional level that would have held up in any graduate seminar in America. She studied method acting under Strasberg at the Actors Studio in New York, treating performance as an intellectual discipline requiring the same rigor as any academic pursuit. She became one of method acting's most dedicated practitioners through relentless systematic self-education. And while she was doing all of this, studios gave her the same basic role 23 times. Variations on beautiful but non-threatening, appealing but unthreatening. She was building a library to transcend their vision, studying Stanislavski's theories at 3 a.m. while Hollywood executives planned another film where she'd play girl. Her annotated copy of Streetcar sits in archives now. Scholars can read her notes on Blanche's psychology, see where she marked passages about delusion and desperation. Bus Stop and Some Like It. Hot proved she could deliver performances of extraordinary depth and comedic sophistication that critics couldn't ignore. They finally acknowledged her talent. The reviews were glowing. The box office numbers were enormous, and Hollywood kept casting her in the same roles anyway. Because the image was more profitable than the artist, the brand was worth more than the person. They'd rather have Marilyn Monroe the product than Marilyn Monroe the actress. She could have played Blanche Dubois, she could have played Lady Macbeth. She had the range, the training, the intellectual preparation. Instead, they handed her another script where her character's defining trait was being attractive 23 times. The same role 23 times. If you think more people need to hear this story, leave a like. It's how we reach the audience Marilyn never got. And then came her last night, and the detail that, once you hear it, you will never forget. The Truth in 400 Books. The book found on her nightstand the night she passed away, Fyodor Dostoyevsky's The Brothers Karamazov. Open, a passage underlined about suffering and redemption, one of the most intellectually demanding novels ever written in any language. A book that challenges philosophy students and literature professors. And it was the last thing she was reading, not a magazine, not a script, not the kind of light reading you'd expect from the woman Hollywood sold to the world. Dostoyevsky, open on her nightstand, underlined in her handwriting to the very end. A woman who spent her entire life hiding her brilliance to survive. Her last act on earth was studying Dostoyevsky, still educating herself, still building the private university that nobody knew about, still refusing to be what they told her she was. Even at the very end, Christie's opened her library in 1999 and revealed the woman Hollywood had spent decades burying. 430 volumes, Freud, Joyce, Dostoyevsky, Whitman, Dickinson, Ellison, Paine, Stanislavski, Williams, Fromm. Every book was physical proof that everything they said about her was a carefully constructed lie. The myth wasn't an accident, it was deliberate. Hollywood needed her to be empty because her emptiness justified everything they did to her. If she was intelligent, educated, thoughtful, then what they did became much harder to defend. And remember, every penny from those books went to literacy education. The woman they said couldn't think became, in passing, one of the largest individual donors to teaching other people how to read. The irony is devastating, and it was entirely intentional. She chose that charity. She decided where the money would go. Even from beyond the grave, she was fighting the myth. Her library tells us who Marilyn Monroe actually was. Not the tragic blonde, not the hollow bombshell they sold you, the reader, the writer, the thinker. The woman who built a private university and fought every single day to remain human inside an industry designed to turn her into a product. The woman who documented her own psychological struggle in real time while smiling for photographers. Who wrote poetry that could stand alongside the masters. Who studied revolutionary politics during McCarthyism. Who annotated Stanislavski at 3 a.m, who was still reading Dostoyevsky in her final hours. 400 books sat on her shelves the entire time, physical evidence right there in her home. Filled with her handwriting, and for 37 years, nobody bothered to look. Nobody thought to ask what was on the bookshelves of the woman they called empty. The question was never whether Marilyn Monroe could read. The question was whether anyone was willing to look closely enough to see the truth. For 37 years, the answer was no. Now we know better. We just had to be willing to look. Now, we've told you Marilyn's story, but she wasn't the only one Hollywood buried. There's another Golden Age star who hid a secret for decades, one so explosive that when it finally surfaced, it didn't just end a career. It rewrote everything we thought we knew about the most powerful studio in Hollywood. That story is next. Subscribe so you don't miss it, and tell us in the comments, which of these revelations hit you the hardest? We'll see you in the next one.